gentlemen, we have a treat today, my friends. It has been quite a morning. I have with me my distinct pleasure, Mr. Chip Wilson, and a couple of guitars that we'll get to in a second, and they're not going to look familiar to you, and they shouldn't. But we'll get there. Sir, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for
very much.
The work that you've put in already today before we hit this podcast.
It's been a hell of a morning.
It's been great.
You know, under old Uncle Joe, we recorded a couple songs on these guitars. Joe sees everything. WWJD, what would Joe do? You just play the song. That's ultimately what that he would do.
That's exactly right.
And we'll get to Joe Pass in a minute because this is an interesting. We have Chip Wilson on number one guitar, and Chip brought two, which is fine by me. Chip has had a varied and long life in music, a very successful life in music with many different thousands of stages, many different iterations of groups and all sorts of stuff. It is my pleasure to have you here. And again, stay tuned. We're going to get to these things in a couple of minutes. I can say honestly, I've never recorded guitars like these, Chip. These are killer guitars. They record like they do what you want them to do, man. They are well done.
Isn't that great?
It is great, but I know this is a tricky one, but tell us about if you can tell us about give us a synopsis of your life in music.
Okay.
A tricky one.
It is super tricky, but to this day, I play in church weekly, but I started in a church choir at like age 6 or 7. And thank God for that, because all that vocal training put me through years and years of barroom singing and nightclub singing and 9 or 10 gigs a week worth of it. So, that's where my career started. But early on, like by the time I was 8 or 9 or 10, I was listening to pop music, Motown music. I was listening to the British stuff. I remember stuff from Jamaica, like My Boy Lollipop and The Israelites by Desmond Decker. And I just heard like all this different kinds of music. A lot of that, my brother was responsible for exposing me to a lot of music, my brother David. And he took me to my first concert. He took me to a Motown review. So like before I was 12 or 13, I had already seen like Smokey Robinson and Mary Wells and the Supremes and the Four Tops and so on perform. And it was a time to get hooked on that. And honestly, the Beatles and Bob Dylan kind of put me there. And I got my first guitar when I was maybe 12 or 12, I think.
What kind of guitar was it?
No name.
Silvertone or one of those?
No name.
Just no-namer?
No, it was pretty much no name. It came apart pretty quickly. My father bolted it back together. In an awkward teenage moment, I burned that guitar up in the fireplace after witnessing a concert by Jimi Hendrix, in which he did not burn his guitar up. And so I burned my first guitar up in my parents' fireplace.
You burned it because you were frustrated or because you were just the coolest 15-year-old girl?
I'll be honest, I was high.
Ah, yes. It can happen, my friend.
Let's just say.
More than once.
Just be honest about that.
You're damn right. I'm gonna, your brother, you mentioned your brother Dan? David, sorry.
Yeah.
Shout outs to big brothers. My older brother Jeff brought me to my first concert as well. And David did it. What was you had a guitar at a young age. What was the earliest, barring your brother pushed you into certain types of music, is there a guitarist or a musician that was the guy for you? I want to be that guy, Charlie Christian. Do I want to be Jimi Hendrix? Was there that, or it was more, I'm going to explore this?
I think for me as an early teenager, it was probably more Bob Dylan and the kind of the Rubber Soul and the 2 or 3 albums around Rubber Soul that the Beatles did that had elements of acoustic music and so on, not just like 2.5 minute, two electric guitars, bass and drums kind of tunes, but Norwegian wood tunes and stuff like that.
A little more orchestrated.
Yeah, so, well, even just like guitar music. And the Dylan, certainly Bob Dylan was a big, a huge influence. I, as a teenager, was intrigued by Hendrix, but put off by Hendrix. And I also knew that I did not have Hendrix was not within my grasp. I didn't have either the cultural or the actual musical background to be able to grasp what Jimi Hendrix was doing. I never tried to attempt Jimi Hendrix material until much later in my life.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, the argument could be made exactly how much did he know he was doing and how much was some sort of...
No kidding, man. Because
the dude rewrote how to do it.
There is still magic in our world somehow,
Yeah.
And when you find somebody that's doing that, that's an amazing thing. I appreciated him, but I never tried to emulate him until I did a few Hendrix tunes later on.
Understood.
Jolly Christian didn't enter my consciousness until college age.
Good, because then you would have fucking quit. So would I.
Probably. Django Reinhardt and Charlie Christian both sort of came to me around the same time, and I recognized the difference. And I also recognized one of my great heroes who I was able to hear perform several times, Freddie Green with a Count Basie band. Just a rhythm player to the core.
To the core.
And sometimes he wasn't even really playing a note. He was just getting a sound that was related to the key that they were in or the chord they were playing. But sometimes he just would play one note or just a dampened chord or just 2 or 3 notes. Amazing art. And the kind of the greatest guitar job, honestly, being a great rhythm player. Whew, man, that's a job, and it's really an accomplishment if you can do that.
I'm sure, Chip. The gigs that you play, Chip and I play at Bratz with Dean Zucchero, the Zen master of all things blues in New Orleans.
He deserves it.
And people, I'm sure at those gigs and all the other gigs you do and the gigs, you get in guitar conversations and people, like I have an answer to anything. How do I become a better guitar player? And most of the time I say, make sure that you be a rhythm guitar player before anything else, because all lead stuff doesn't make any, it's 5% of what you'll do.
I really think that's...
And I point them at Freddie Green.
Yeah, very
Freddie
sensible.
Green did it 2 notes, sometimes 1, sometimes none.
Yeah.
Freddie Green, kids.
Yeah, man.
Learn your Freddie Green and you will always have something, you always have a band around you, that's for sure. If you can do it right.
I had a teacher named Paul Asbell, who's still really the leading guitarist in Vermont, northern Vermont especially. And he taught Trey Anastasio from Fish, every single reasonably accomplished guitar player in the last 40 years in Vermont.
He was what's his name?
Paul Asbell, wonderful player, and anyone that spends time looking up Paul Asbell will be delighted with what you find. But he taught me the Freddie Green stuff. At my request, I said, I really want to learn that style. And so he taught that to me. 20 years later, 25, 30 years later, he heard me playing in New Orleans, and he's like, man, I can hear it. He probably, no, he didn't, I had to tell him where it came from. He's like, man, I can hear you listening to Snooks Eaglin, and there's like some Tuck Andrus in there, and there's like, but that's all your own thing, man. That's you've evolved your own thing. I said, no, man, you taught that to me. He said, no, I didn't. I said, no, I just ditched the pick. I started playing syncopated stuff with my right hand and using
we'll get there, my
using
friend.
left hand Freddie Green chords. And I demonstrated it to him, and I said, watch the left hand. And he was like, okay. So I even amazed my
stuff in there with the fingers, like a lot of percussive stuff with the fingers.
Yeah, super percussive.
The original drums, my friend.
Yes,
pretty much. I mean, I don't know
here's
about
the
that, but timekeeper. Yeah, that's the original drum. But these things, treat them like drums, and they'll treat you back, and they'll do a lot for you. If they turn into lead noodling horse shit stuff, that's all they're ever gonna be. They ain't ever gonna write your song. That's for sure.
Yeah. I've done big band work and that kind of thing, and played in a gypsy jazz band. And currently, my rhythm guitar challenge is playing in a reggae band.
We talked about that when I was over your place last week. Reggae is something. if somebody asked me to play in a reggae band, that would take me a little time to get that feel down. It's different than jazz.
I somehow managed to do it.
I've heard you play it. You're a killer guitar player.
The guys like in the band are like, wow, you can do that? I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Mystifying. Reggae music to me, some of it mystifyingly simple. I know what they're doing.
Oh,
I can hear it, but I'm like, wow, I don't know if I can pull that off.
It's all about something bigger than just
something.
The groove and the techniques and so on. There's something. It's like other types. It's a folk music in a way, and like other types of music. There is, like I said before, there's still. I'm so glad about this at age 71. There's still some magic in something that you and I get to do. I hope other people find it and can hear it.
Yeah. Well, you've had it was being at your house, and we'll get to these guitars shortly. Being at your house, two things. We were talking about influences and stuff like that, and it's not in the frame because I got it horizontal for YouTube. But Joe Pass is the only picture that I have over this, and we were introduced to each other as blues players, which both of us play blues music. But both of us were involved in a lot of other things other than blues music, jazz being something that both of us are involved in, so specifically solo jazz guitar. And I said, Joe Pass, and you just offhandedly said, oh yeah, Joe's a really cool guy. He was nice. We hung out together in Colorado, and my ears went, ping. It was like an idiot. When I was a kid, he was playing around New York and New Jersey when I was younger, and I never got to see him. Something always came up. I never got to see him, but you sat with him, hung out with him, drank wine with him when he would run through Colorado.
It was actually Burlington, Vermont.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. That's the East Coast version of the mountains of Colorado, just lower mountains.
What was it like? And then we'll go to we'll talk about Joe, and then we'll move to a certain guitar builder that so a guy who knew a thing or two about a chisel and how to make a guitar. We'll talk about him after Kelly.
I met Joe because of this guy that you're talking about.
Please.
Jimmy DeQuisto. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
And Jimmy DeQuisto told Joe that he should visit the shop that I was working in Burlington, Vermont, which was Boris Guitars. Roger Boris was a master of that shop and still builds guitars.
He does. I've never played one, but I've read great things about that guy's guitars.
They're great guitars. I helped him make probably about 100, maybe over 100 guitars. And so anyway, people would stop by, partly because of our reputation, but also Jimmy would just say to it, like Joe Pass was a big buddy of his. And they both came kind of like out of a very similar background, Sicilian families. Joe was West Coast, Jimmy was East Coast, but so Joe got in touch and said, hey, I'd like to stop by your shop. And we had like all these art stock guitars we were building. Plus I think I owned at that stage a D'Angelico, 1949 D'Angelico style A.
Jesus.
Actually, it was really a special in the book, but it had been fully restored by Roger Boris and myself. And so there's a pretty nice D'Angelico sitting there. And also we happened at that stage to have a DeQuisto, Jimmy DeQuisto guitar in the shop too. So, Joe Pass comes in and he's like looking around.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but for the uninitiated, for the people who don't, these are passions of ours.
Yes.
Guitar. Chip's talking about guitars that if they were retailing now, 70, 80, 90, that maybe more, well over 50. Some of them would top 100. I've seen DeQuistos for over 200 grand, something like that. So
absolutely.
We're talking about the heaviest of heavy hitters that you're associated with.
Amazing.
Please continue.
What an amazing opportunity for me.
Killer guitars.
I appreciated it at the time, and when I think about it now, I'm sort of like, wow. But anyway, so Joe shows up at the shop. He's like, wow, you got a D'Angelico, you got this. This is great. I love this. And so I'm like, he's like, hey man, you want to come to the show? And I'm like, I'm sorry, Joe, I got a gig. I probably had like a $45 gig or something. I don't know what it was. But anyway, I went and I did my gig, and I said, let's meet afterwards. What hotel are you in? And so we went, and we sat and he's like, I wonder if they have a cigar. and you know, Joe did the Synanon thing and so on, but he had a glass of wine, and that was what he had. He had a glass of wine. He wanted a cigar. I said, Joe, how's the show? He was playing with Ella Fitzgerald. Oh my God, Ella Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
He's like, that's a stupid show. He just hated the amplifier, is what it came down to.
Fair enough.
And he was like, God, I wish I'd had that polytone from your shop. That would have been great. They put a mic on that thing.
Yes,
Everything would have
sir.
been cool. But, you know, so he probably played the world's most amazing show ever
Probably.
at the Flynn Theater in Burlington, Vermont. But to him, it was just another day. He really wanted to talk about friends of ours that we knew in common, you know, mostly guitar players and that kind of thing. And so we hung out more on a social level than we did a musical level. The flip side of that was, you know, I got exposed to Joe Pass, Larry Coryell, Alan Hanlon, Barry Galbraith, all these amazing guitarists who are...
You knew Barry Galbraith?
Yes.
Holy shit.
And you know...
The other guys are great too, but son of a bitch, that guy.
Well, that guy was the consummate
Holy
New York studio guy.
Killer.
Here's what Barry Galbraith said, like about your guitar. Hey, it's only a 12 fret guitar, really, 14 fret guitar with a neck set to 14th fret, but if you can't say it in the first 12 frets, you're not going to say it.
I agree with that.
You know?
I agree with that 100%.
Here we go. I like all this stuff up here.
You do. You go high. I'm like, that's repeated after that. I don't need that in my head.
You know,
do you want to cut away?
I dive back down to the low as soon as I can. It's just a gesture. Anyway. So, you know, I had such great opportunities, you know, hanging out with Joe Pass. But I spent a lot of time studying Joe Pass and trying to get that comping with some melody, some kind of bluesy licks even in there, with a running bass line as much as possible. And I found that as a vocalist, once I was able to sync up the vocal and that guitar part, changed my life.
You don't need 10 guys. You don't need 5 guys in the band if you can kind of do that on your own.
The only problem is when I play with a bass player, I'm always like having to stop myself
that is
from playing
true.
bass lines.
Yeah, it turns into a rhythm. It turns into right back to rhythm. What are you going to do with rhythm?
Yeah, exactly. So you know, and that's great. Anything that makes me rethink, you know, my style, which is 60 plus years old now, whatever my guitar style is. And I did start really being a finger stylist, mostly. You know, anything that makes me change it up is great with me.
Agreed. You get stuck in a lane. Some guys, women that play guitar, they get stuck in lanes and never move out of it. They're great. We were talking before, they're a hell of a guitar player in B flat, but woo, pull them out, it could be tricky. But the thing, like your varied experience is just brilliant, man. It's just brilliant. And I love talking with people who have played, who've got time on the water with these things. They're your lifetime since when you were boys had a guitar. Yeah. I know I've had the longest relationship in my life with one of these. Certainly not a person, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
But I want to get to De Quista for sure.
Sure.
And I remember at your place, you said, "Yeah, Jimmy, he taught me how to put strings on the guitar." And I thought to myself, we were talking about something else. I was checking out these, and what did that Quisto and D'Angelico, absolute pinnacles of archtop as far as I'm concerned. The old school ones, the new school ones are beautiful. I love them. They're killer. They're X brace, but once you put an X brace on an archtop guitar, for me, and I know this is guitar nerd talk, but once you put the X on there, it can turn into a little bit piano-y, and it loses different. A little bit.
Yeah, it doesn't have the thump power.
It doesn't have that, no. It doesn't have that thump, no. Yeah. Very cool for different styles of player, not particularly this player. I like the old school brace, parallel brace. Yeah. What did he teach you about playing the guitar? Not playing the guitar, building the guitar. And I want to know how to put on strings from the dude. I want to know what he did.
Jimmy just had a way of doing things, and this is because he'd been doing this since he was a teenager. he would hang out at the D'Angelico shop because it was in his neighborhood in Little Italy. And I think that there was even like a family relationship of some sort between Jimmy's family and the D'Angelico. John was unmarried, his whole life. Jimmy was very fast at certain things, like things that I still take 10 minutes at, he would do in 2 minutes. I remember saying, Jimmy, how long does it take for you to do the binding on the neck or on the fingerboard there or wherever? And he's like, oh, I don't know, 20 minutes. Jimmy, how long did it take you to do that? 20 minutes. Jimmy, how long does it take you to put the neck on a guitar? Oh, I don't know, anywhere from 8 to 15 hours. I mean, that's the one he thought about. And to him, the neck,
To
like
put
to
it
him,
on the guitar, not to carve it, to
no,
put it on.
to actually
Holy
have
shit.
that be like almost an atomic bond, like woodworking so precise that it was,
Wow.
and I know people that are capable of this now. Stephen Marchione in Houston uses chalk to make sure that his fit is good. I never did that, but I would like work on a guitar neck set on an archtop for 3 or 4 hours. Then I'd just be like, oh my God, I gotta do something else. Come back to it the next day, work on it for 5 or 6 hours. But I might not glue it on for another couple of days until I really knew I had it. Because with a guitar like yours, real quickly, you have to fit the arch with the extension, you have to fit the side, and then you have 2 surfaces that are dovetail shaped on the inside and all of these things have to fit perfectly at the correct neck angle, which then is like, oh my God, that's so hard to do. I'm telling you right now.
I'm sure it is.
So anyway,
I can barely draw a straight line, brother.
yeah,
Let alone
I
do
don't know
that.
if I can either at this stage of my life. But Jimmy just he also taught both Roger and I a lot about acoustics, like not necessarily college, professor acoustics, but sometimes seat of the pants acoustics. Like here's an example. He made a few arch tops and flat tops with instead of his distinctive sound holes, F holes, he used oval shaped sound holes. And I said, yeah, how about that oval sound hole like this on this guitar? And he goes, okay, let's say you got a garden hose, right? And the water's coming out. Let's say you squeeze the tip of that garden hose, the water comes out further. Would be a prime example of how Jimmy taught
That's why
me.
he went to the oval.
Yeah.
That's like, I'm sure there's a whole lot of math involved in that, but it's
I
brute
know
force.
there is, but
It's brute force. It's right.
Yeah.
There's nothing like those guitars. You hear it in the old school band stuff. The guy for the New, the Jazz Philharmonic in New York plays one. I follow him on YouTube, and nothing sounds like him. Nothing sounds like those guitars.
Yeah. He taught me also like the whole tap tuning thing.
What is that? What's the tap thing? Can you
Well,
explain that?
some people are. I mean, here's what I tried to do after I learned from him, and I was carving guitars with very high arches, which he had a pretty relatively flat arch on almost all his guitars. But I would try to make sure that the treble side had a higher tap than the bass side. Just makes sense to me.
Are you pitching it with a note? Like, are you looking for C and G, like
No,
fifth or
I
something?
never looked for a note.
You're looking
Although
for
I know some people would do that, and in the violin tradition, I think there's a tradition of tuning to a certain note. Every piece of wood is different, even if they kind of even look alike, or even might be from the same tree. If the piece of wood came from 10 feet higher in the tree, it's going to sound different from something that was nearer to the base of the tree. Just
No shit.
the way nature works. And wood is somewhat like a muscle. So when I was doing a tap thing, I'd use like my thumb, thunk, and my finger. I also had a hammer that had a felt on it. And I would just go dunk, 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 carve. Jimmy told me this. He said, there's a certain point where you're carving and you realize you need to go slower and slower, and then there's a certain point where you hit it and it goes boink instead of boonk.
That was it.
It just was like, all of a sudden the wood came alive.
I love the noises, the sounds
It's
that
kind of
musicians use. There's a
anyway.
lot of boink in that. There's not enough thunk in that. It's
Yeah,
true.
we got a million things.
It's a twang, thunk.
Yeah, thump, right. So anyway, to me, it was always about liberating the wood from itself, from the tree. It was already glued together. Often the braces were on, and I'd still be tapping a little bit to just see. But also the braces, like how the braces were, like the whole X brace versus parallel brace thing and so on. Jimmy was into the X brace because D'Angelico developed that for the arch top. And so that was his thing. But anyway.
Shows you how many I've played. I thought they were all parallel brace, but I mean.
Yeah, my D'Angelico was parallel brace. At a certain point, like in the 50s,
He changed.
He started doing the X brace. And the reason for that, Chris, I think is this. Most of the 30s and 40s players were playing with a plectrum or a pick and playing in situations where they were rhythm players and would get a solo, but you know, a lot of more rhythm players. Then at a certain point, especially after the big band era started to come to a close, because of a lot of reasons. For instance, people couldn't record during World War II. We weren't allowed to record during World War II. All the materials went to the war effort. So a lot of music got kind of lost and developments got kind of lost. At a certain point, guitar players started thinking more like a piano player, playing with their fingers, playing arpeggios and things like that you can't really do unless you're very adept with it.
Yeah.
And so the X brace had a slightly more delicate sound with a better separation of a better string separation for a fingerstyle player. And I think that's one reason why they became popular and were, you know, replaced
whatever works.
The thump that people needed to be a 1930s big band player.
Necessity is the mother of, as they say.
Always is.
Now,
form does follow function
it does.
too, y'all.
Okay, that's a perfect segue because I definitely want to get to, like I said in the beginning of the podcast. Before the podcast, we did a recording session under the eyes of old Uncle Joe. And the guitars that you guys see in front of you here, Chip built them both from. Well, we'll get to from scratch. How much is from scratch? How much is? But you built them both, and I will say. Absolutely distinctive guitars. I've played guitars, you know, both of us have played guitars by, we've been around the block, played hundreds and hundreds of guitars, maybe more. I don't respond well to electric guitars. I much rather acoustic guitars, but that's just a personal preference. These two things are unbelievable. They sound absolutely fantastic, and they record even better than they sound. The one that's closest to me, let's start there. The one that's closest to Chip is a warm Telecaster, Stratocaster hybrid with all. It's got one pickup, no tone control. Right?
Two tone control.
Oh, there's two. Oh, that's right. There's two. This one has no tone. A killer guitar, great electric guitar tone. Chip, you could literally release the friggin' guitar tracks that we recorded with no processing whatsoever. It's a beautiful electric guitar.
It's a nice guitar, man. Thank you.
Now, I can't give you enough compliments. If I'm forced to choose, the winner of the two is this thing sitting next to me. I've never heard a guitar like that.
It's just super distinctive.
It's incredible. Incredibly distinctive, and it's recorded. What's the song that we're going to make sure it gets on Spotify?
Alan Toussaint's Limousine.
Alan Toussaint's Limousine, boys and girls, on Spotify, coming your way. I'll let you know. Chip will let you know when it's out there. But this thing is part resonator, part dobro, part Telecaster, part Dan Electro. all of the greatest, all of the tones that are great about these guitars are in this guitar. How the fuck did you pull this off?
I made this. I mean, this was sort of a joke, but in some ways, constructing this guitar was a little bit like sausage making, if you want to know the truth. But the story is this: this top was from a project that was never going to be completed, or which I knew in my late life I was never going to complete. And I had come up. I did a lot of time driving and a certain amount of touring and a lot of time driving between New England and New Orleans, especially after Katrina.
Holy Jesus, that's a long road, brother.
And I started thinking about bracings, and I was intrigued by the idea of a bracing that emulated a dobro spider bridge, which has like 6 or 8 arms that come off of it that rest on a plate that vibrates. And I thought, what about if you had a bracing that sort of resembled that? And then as I thought about it, I thought, okay, I'm going to also do that, but I'm also going to have some braces that I'm going to cut from a bigger stock and split down the middle, so that one brace in this actually has 3 little arms that come off of the bigger section of that brace. And I had all these ideas and all these ideas and all these ideas. I never finished the guitar for a few reasons, which we don't need to go into.
Fair enough.
But the top sat there for a long time and just gathered dust in my room where my guitar tools are. And I was building these solid bodies, and I probably built like about 15 or 16 solid body, parts guitars, parts casters, Frankensteins, whatever you want to call them. And everyone got better and better, like, wow, oh shit, I love this one. Well, this one's better than that one, so I'm gonna take this one and sell it. And so I just was thinking, all right, what haven't you done? You haven't done a chambered guitar. And I'm always concerned, because of a lifetime of repetitive motion injury, the weight of a guitar is always critical to me. They gotta sound good too, and a heavy guitar can really be like, that's the guitar, man, that's got the presence and the sound. But a lightweight guitar can also have presence and sound. It depends on how your strategy is of building it. This one has that kind of presence and sound with a very lightweight body of Paulonia, but a very heavy neck of something almost rosewood density called red zebra wood. This one has a traditional woods of ebony violin and maple violin wood, D'Angelico, D'Acquisto woods, and spruce. This is a spruce top. So I'm like, how am I going to do this? I really don't have the capacity to make a neck anymore. So there's a guy in northern New York named Tucker Freestone who made both of these necks. They're very high quality, a really nice quality wood. I was delighted with both of the necks, and I did like some of my own special stuff, some of which was related to what D'Acquisto taught me about how you treat the edge of the fingerboard to just make it feel played in and that kind of thing. Now companies call that rolled fingerboards. I was rolling the fingerboards 45 years ago.
Shit. Silliness.
Anyway, yeah, whatever.
No shit, they weren't.
But it's good. It's a good thing to do.
No,
it's a right thing
otherwise
to do,
it's cut your
I
fingers.
think all of them.
Exactly.
Anyway, so I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I'm not going to make a Telecaster body and then glue this top on it. So I found a guy in Texas that was making chambered Telecaster bodies. I tried to tell him, can you make one with no top? He just couldn't get past the idea that he... Anyway, so I took a tool and I literally cut the middle of the top that was on this body. And this is pine, Texas pine spruce. And I used a Dremel tool and chisels and hammers and every tool that I had at my disposal to just obliterate the middle, and then kind of dialed it up a little bit and reduced the amount of lumber inside the guitar so it would have kind of a nice hollowness to it.
Yeah.
And the result, after I glued that on,
The result is brilliant.
it came out great. I mean, it's got almost a decay resembling a flat top, but there's, like, as we talked about earlier, there's sort of a biscuit resonator sound to it.
There's a lot going on in that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. it's not a deep sounding guitar. It's in the higher voice spectrum, but you know, the bass stuff comes through fine. And you know, when I think of the design, I think, all right, Leo Fender. Thank you, Leo Fender. The bridge and tailpiece are pure Mario Macaferri, not really exactly, but certainly inspired by that. The body and the decor of the sound hole remind me of Orville Gibson, like 125 years ago.
Yeah, the old ones.
Yeah, building guitars in Shadowgate, New York, you know, northern New York, which is not far from where this neck was made, by the way. And so, you know, combining that and this knowledge that I got from Roger Boris and Jimmy DeQuisto, and then another 40 years of guitar building and playing. And if there's anything that makes me special as a player, it's that I've spent so much time working on these guitars that my connection with guitars is probably deeper than most guitar players can achieve.
If you're making them, absolutely,
just, you know,
making them and playing them for sure.
And like just thinking about repair work, like today, most really good guitars are set up by a Plek machine, a machine that does that. To me, one of the most fun things about guitar building is that last several hours of setting it up and making it work. And you listen to the player and you go, hey, will you play it for me a little bit? Oh, I see. You got kind of a heavy hand on the bass strings, but you play the treble strings very lightly, or just check out how they play. And then set up the guitar. And like 9 times out of 10, I'll nail it for people. Or for myself. Now this guitar is set up, plays like a dream. This one's a little harder to play, but I want that, you know, that acoustic nature of it to come out a little bit more. So every guitar's got its own.
I'm not bullshitting you, Chip. I've played a lot of different guitars in my life. That is one of the most, if not the most distinctive guitars I've ever heard.
It's certainly,
it's killer.
It's certainly as distinctive as anything I've ever made.
Absolutely.
And I've been involved in some pretty funny guitars making in my career, believe me. I made a guitar, a solid body, out of just a chunk of spruce, and I cut it into the approximate shape of Antonio Stradivari's first guitar, or one of 3 or 4 that he's known to have made. It was like spruce about this thick. I grafted a reject neck from the Boris shop onto it, put a couple of pickups that I got for free on that thing. I took it and I played it for a while. Someone still got it. Someone told me that they have it. I can't remember who it is that has it, but someone has that guitar. I just did some crazy shit. I wanted to see what like just a big hunk of spruce sounded like. It was fine. It wasn't ergonomic to play.
Well, yeah.
I just built it because I just, you know, I didn't design it. I just kind of made it to see.
And all of that stuff, like I find the I don't necessarily find origin stories the origin story, like where you came from, what you did. Okay, your parents kind of, everybody's influenced good and bad by their parents, etc. So it's much more the journey than the origin for me. It's not where you come from, it's where you are right now. And all that, making a big block of spruce and doing all that led to this thing.
Sure.
I mean, you didn't intentionally shoot for this when you were doing the spruce, but all that experience.
But I owned a Telecaster back then.
Well,
for a while anyway.
I didn't know Telecaster. That's for you. Might look like one. It very well might look like one for sure.
This thing that's a Strat body is closer to a Telecaster than this is.
And this is, I love this thing. It's certainly not, it's bare bones in the best possible way. There's not even a freaking tone control.
Or a volume, there's no volume control either.
No volume, no tone. The pickup's going right in. You got to do it on the amplifier.
Hello, people. We like to use our fingers.
Well, that's the trick, yeah. There's a lot going on.
You can be dynamic
right
without any of that stuff. And on some gigs, I would use a volume pedal, if only just to shut it off. You know, like at my church gig, so it doesn't ring out while someone's speaking or something. You know, I'll shut it off with a volume pedal. But I really believe that a guitar like this, you're just playing it, like you should be able to get the power sound out of your hands, and you should be able to get the delicate sound without screwing around a whole lot.
You should. Yeah, you should. Not everybody does, but you should.
But I mean, with this guitar, I'm manipulating the tone controls quite a bit to get a certain sound.
This one, interesting contrast. This one has no tone, no volume controls. It's a pickup into a jack, That's it.
Yeah.
This one has, usually a guitar is going to have one volume and one tone control per pickup, generally sometimes a couple. This one's configured a little bit differently. Tell us about this one.
Okay, I have built a lot of guitars with only a volume control, and but this with this pickup mounted in this position, this is actually a Telecaster bridge, humbucking bridge thing that you might put on a Telecaster if you wanted to put a humbucker in the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it was going to be a pretty piercing sound. This is like a imitation of a Gibson P90, which is a more piercing sound than say a Gibson humbucker would typically be. And so I was like, all right, I'll wire a tone control, and I wired the correct value tone control to go with this pickup, which was a 500K. I can't remember the capacitor. And I'm like, yeah, all right, this is good, usable, good. There was another hole in this pick guard, in this control thing.
Why not?
Like, there's another hole there. Huh, what should I do? So I just, a potentiometer doesn't weigh that much, plastic knob doesn't weigh that much, so I'm like, all right, I'll just put a different value tone control. Potentiometer is 250K, not 500K. Which is sort of eliminates some highs as you roll it off, especially, and then more than a humbucking 500K pickup would. And then also different value capacitor wired to it. It's subtle. What I found was using the two together gave me, either one is okay, you can use either one. Using the two together actually had kind of a impact that I didn't expect. I just like, often a tone control just takes it to mud sometimes.
Yeah.
But I found like manipulating both of them, I was getting some interesting sounds. And when we recorded this earlier, both of these tone controls were just dialed back about, 30% or something like that.
It's when I see a guitar like this with a only bridge pickup, an electric guitar, I immediately, it's a biased way of thinking for sure, because I go right to the tellies and kind of ice pick. Some people want that.
Or like the Les Paul Specials or Juniors.
Real.
But even those like had a P90, which is less piercing than that, ice pickup that Leo put on the Esquires and shit.
This thing, I'm not bullshitting you, Chip. This thing had as much versatility as a 2-pickup guitar.
It does.
It's what came out over here. Like I said, I have very rarely, if ever, recorded anybody where the track, your voice is fantastic, the guitar was, minimally just plugged right in. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do here. Sweeten it up a little bit, but it's not much to do. It was like, this is it's absolutely killer.
Yeah,
I'm
lucky. I'll just interrupt you for a second.
Please.
I'm lucky. This one was kind of an experiment. I didn't know how this was going to come out, or delighted how it came out. But generally in guitar making, I have been able to predict by the various techniques and various structural details that I would include in any guitar design, ranging from an arch top to a chambered solid body or a thin line or whatever. I was very lucky in that almost all the time I was able to get the guitar to sound pretty much the way I predicted it would sound when I started out. In other words, I wrote a book with a plot, a beginning and a middle and an ending, and the ending was what I thought it should be, basically, and this guitar was pretty much did that. I kind of knew where this one was going to go, and it had to do with the interaction between the pickup, certainly, but I think a lot of it comes from the interaction between this relatively soft body of Paulownia, which in Asia they call Empress wood, and this Central African product, red zebra wood, which is almost the density, very, very similar to rosewood. Very dense, hard, very dense wood.
But I can't say,
the
I cannot say
interaction is
again,
great.
these are incredibly light. The neck might be heavy on that one, but these are, they're lighter, certainly way lighter than
Oh, I
this.
bet you they are.
But they're very light, and I've picked up Telecasters, and
They could be a plank, man.
the guys that taught me how to play guitar, if they saw me standing up playing the guitar, they would say, Chrissy, what are you doing? If you're standing up, you're not thinking about what's going on. Sit down and play the guitar.
That's interesting.
It's true. The old, play the
Every time you
old
ever
school
saw me
Italians
playing, I was sitting
from
down.
New Jersey and New York.
Hello.
That's the guys that are Frank Turner. Was
Those
the
are
guy who was
I
like,
was basically hanging out
Yeah,
with too,
yeah.
in the New York contingent.
but some of these things I'll pick up, in passing. I'm like, there's no fucking way I could carry that thing around. It weighs 10 pounds, 12 pounds.
Yeah. These both come like about 7.5
Yeah,
pounds,
nothing.
7.6, something like that. And I think that's like an acceptable weight. So I hear sometimes like online, someone's like, my vintage Tele is only 6.5 pounds. I'm like, God, how the hell did they? I mean, that wood aged over time, yes, but also swamp ash.
Who knows? I don't know.
Swamp ash is very, very light, and swamp ash is like one of those secret, guitar maker things. Ooh, swamp ash. There's other ash that's the same variety as swamp ash. Swamp ash has to be below the Mason-Dixon line, typically, because it will have wider seasonal grain than it will up north, where the seasonal grains, because of the cold weather in winter,
There you go.
get very tight. Also, by virtue of growing either in a swamp or by a river or a pond or something, it also gets a slightly different nature in the wood. And so I've had ash guitars that were like, oh my God, this thing is, excuse me, it's so heavy, it's unbelievable. I carved an ash guitar down to like this.
Still heavy.
It was still ungodly heavy. I mean, that thing had like, body contours like you wouldn't believe. And it was a great guitar, but I just no way I was going to keep that thing.
Understood. My friend, I'm gonna. Before we go, I know I talked about it before, and about the string lesson. And let's close it there. I don't want to.
Right.
I want people to watch the whole thing, and I definitely want them to. Okay, how do you put on strings from the guy who made some of the greatest guitars in history?
All right.
Chip, how's it happen?
Jimmy looked at how we were putting on strings, and he said, that's going to get tangled up at a gig. Like if you break a string on a gig, that's going to get tangled up, and it'll take you 5 minutes, and you might have to get a screwdriver out to pull it off the thing, and so on. He said, make sure always that the wrappings of nothing crisscrosses, because that will cause a flaw in the string that might be the thing that makes it break later on. The pressure of one string breaking down against another.
Sure.
So he had a way of, let's say this is the string post. He would take the string, pull it from the tailpiece in the bridge, get it up against the string post, and holding tension on it with his other hand that's not a string post, he would then wrap it about 4 to 5 times for a treble string, and then poke it through the hole and just kink it to the side. If you kink it up, it screws up your gig bag in your guitar case. If you kink it to the side, the string's not going to dick up your guitar case. And that way you end up with like 3 or 4 windings all in a row. Not only that, because you've kept tension on it, it's not up to pitch, but it's a lot closer to up to pitch than like winding it up. Like maybe 2, 3, if you do it right, 2 or 3 turns of the tuner, and you're
Snakes
like
it up.
close to pitch. With the bass strings, same thing, only just like there's not as much room. Plus the bass strings have the windings on them that keep the, one of the things you're trying to do is create a little friction between the windings with 4 or 5 windings on the treble strings. And then the bass strings don't need that because they've got those windings that kind of create that friction anyway. And they're thicker, so there's not as much room on the post. So you just might wrap the low E string, 1.5 times or once and poke it on through.
So 1.5 to 3 or 4 times straight line,
and just
make
hold
it
it
like this.
Yep, and hold it so there's some string tension on there while you're winding. It's believe me, it's It took me a while.
Yeah, I'm trying to
get the
visualize that.
movements.
That's not that. I'm
And
gonna
then
give it a go.
don't like, you know, push it through the hole twice or
No,
like lock it or all some of these things I see. Man, I can't wait till you break a string on your gig and the singer's looking at you while you take 8 minutes to change it. I saw Buddy Guy change a string in the middle of a song. He broke the string on purpose, I'm certain, and changed the string in the middle of the song as part of the act. So, you know, these things can be done pretty quickly and easily if you really know how to do it.
Done. So if it looks like a knot, it's wrong. Make it look pretty, like a lined up thing.
Yeah,
If it looks, if you
nice, everything nice and even.
makes sense, man.
Yeah.
Chip, don't go anywhere. I want to get some sound samples of these things. But man, this was one hell of a conversation. I enjoyed the hell out of it.
No, me too. And thank you for doing this.
Hey,
I
man.
think these podcasts you're doing are super hip, and I'm grateful to be involved. Thank you.
Well, that's my pleasure, brother.
All right.
All right, that's one for the books, Mr. Chip Wilson. Facebook,
Chip Wilson Nola.
Chip Wilson Nola.
There was
on
another
Facebook.
Chip Wilson I didn't want to be.
You don't want to be that guy.
So I stuck Nola on the end.
Chip Wilson Nola, you want to get in touch with Chip? Fire away, my friends.
Hit me up.
All right, man.
All right.
Thanks,
man.